Welcome to BT Murrayfield for View from the Commentary Box for this special edition of the programme in the aftermath of Scotland winning 35 points to 7 against Wales. Well, with me to chew over that game is BBC Radio Scotland's commentator for the game, Stuart McFarlane, Euan Welsh from Borders Rugby Television and Radio, and also from the BBC, Grahame MacGregor. Well, let's start with you, Stuart. Certainly a good one to commentate on, I would imagine. Plenty of excitement.
Second half. Definitely. The first half, it was almost as if, is this going to be another sequel in the series of Gatlin films? You've got, I don't know how many Rambos and Rockies and Police Academies. This was like Gatlin 12. And at half time, you were thinking, we've seen some of this movie before. How's it going to play out in the second half? 13 points to 7. And Wales, in fairness, had butchered opportunities to maybe amassed 20 points in that first half, certainly 18. That's not out of the question when you consider how they played, because they were over the 40 minutes, the first 40 minutes, you could say they were the more dominant side. They bossed a lot of the play, and the only part of the game where they were not in front was actually on the scoreboard itself. And, you know, if you had a scorecard, a lot of people would have said, look, you know, Scotland need to do something in the second half, because if Wales can turn the advantages they're finding in the first half into points, then this game could, you know, begin to run away from the Scots.
Because Scotland's defence were very good this afternoon, no doubt about that. But as you said, Wales did blunder a few possible tries away.
174 tackles over the course of the game, 90 tackles in the first 40 minutes, 5 missed tackles, so the remainder then in the second. 11 penalties conceded. Wales in the end conceded 17 penalties, and I think the majority were coming in the closing stages, but the game had by then unravelled for them. So I think half-time, I think it was a very important coming together of the Scotland players, equally so from Warren Gatlin's point of view, because they were down 6 points. They themselves hadn't necessarily played all that well because of the chances they had butchered, and it was a case of how is this second half going to play out. But you could see Wales were trying to draw Scotland into almost an arm wrestling contest, and 8 or so minutes into the second half, Scotland took the initiative. It was their agenda. They laid out the agenda. Finn Russell was right at the very heart of that, and that's when things seemed to change.
Finn Russell, there's a name that we mention quite a bit now. Man of the match, there was absolutely no doubt about that one. Grahame MacGregor.
Yeah, it doesn't seem that long ago we're discussing the fact, why is Finn not there? Will Gregor bring him back? Because really we need him. By jingo, he's certainly made it worthwhile, his return to the Scotland fold. And today another masterful display coming onto his game as it went on. Shouldn't forget that we were talking earlier about the first half there. Scotland had that lead, 2 penalties. A bit of common sense for once, no kicking to the corner. Let's just take their kickable goal, shots at goal, and that made that 6 point difference, which made Scotland leading at the break. Very useful, that, I think, a good platform for them to then really get themselves settled and get going in that second half, which I'm sure from Wales's point of view they were glad if this whistle finally went. If it had been another 10 minutes, goodness knows what would have happened, because they were just crumbling away in the face of Scotland's relentless attacks. And once Scotland got that forward going game, which they struggled a bit with obviously in the first half, that really had the cat amongst the pigeons for Wales, and we saw the scores mounting, and Finn Russell was at the heart of virtually all of that. To maybe the uninitiated who would be saying something, well, you never scored any tries and you missed some kicks and all that, but it was worth it for all the fact that what he did, very similar to the last game, in the centre of all things, just dictating everything and playing. I was listening to Kyle Stein just down the a few minutes ago there, and he was saying, you know, when waiting for the pass from Finn, he says he just delays it that nanosecond, which bamboozles the opposition, frustrates you because you want it quicker, but you know it's going to come because you can have the trust in him. And he's that kind of player now. He really is totally world class, and was at the foundation and at the centre of all that Scotland did in that second half to finally come away with that magnificent win.
The press conference, Tom English from the BBC mentioned it as well to Gregor Townsend and to Jamie Ritchie about the fact that, here's a guy who is totally inspirational and obviously affecting the performance around him as well. And when we go back to, like, the autumn tests, or November tests, whenever they were, and we were looking at Adam Hastie going off, by which time, of course, Finn wasn't even in the squad. Had he not been injured, we probably wouldn't even be talking here now about Finn Russell in a Scottish team.
Yeah, quite in the sense that it opened the door for let's be honest, for Gregor to say, we'll better bring him back in, because obviously Adam's injured. Whether he would have done it anyway, we'll never maybe know, but thankfully he did. And one thing about Finn is he's got to that stage now, he's so good, and everyone knows that. His own side, who trust totally in him, and the opposition now. Now, of course, Scotland get into that situation of seeing the opposition target Finn, and it opens the door up for the centres and for the wingers to get more space, because they can play off that kind of situation that it's not always necessarily going to be Russell, it's going to be meeting the next move. So when you get to that position with a player, it's really great for a side. So their trust in him and their trust in each other just builds all the way, and that's really what you see in the Scotland team at the present moment, that they're quality players, virtually every one of them, and they're now trusting in each other in what they do, and when times are not as good, when things look a wee bit tricky as they were going into the second half, they know that they can trust that they will come true in the end, and that proved to be the case.
Well, let's bring in the younger one amongst us. This is Euan Welsh. It's your first time in the press box. Did you enjoy that experience?
Yeah, it was good. It was a good result to be a kind of part and see it from the press point of view.
Decisive win, wasn't it, for Scotland?
Yeah, it was. It was a great win, and I think as you kind of touched on, it showed that when we had the confidence to kind of say that we were in control, we could control the match. The boys stuck in and done that, and they've managed to then run away with it in the end, because Wales were left without much of a say in it, because it was just like Scotland decided, right, that's fine, we're going to take control of this and play how we want to play, and not really react to what you're doing, play how we want to play. And I think that what's most enlightening to me is that even when we've not got, like, Hogg went off really early, and maybe when we've not got some of the big names playing, like Darcy Graham's obviously out injured, and even when Russell's not playing at his best, it seems like we're still a good team, and we can still play well, even when these big showpiece names maybe aren't at 100%. It's still easy for us to kind of just work away at our own thing, and that shows that the group of boys obviously believe in themselves. It's
interesting as well, because we're kind of slightly older than you, and quite a lot, in fact, older than you, and we've gone through the heartache, haven't we, Grahame, and haven't we, Stuart, about following Scotland, and this young whippersnapper comes in, and it's all wine and roses, isn't it?
I wouldn't say that.
It was today.
It was today. I just think that it's something that's been taken away. We've seen it kind of at periods during the Van Cotter era, where it started things that were kind of looking good, and then in times during Gregor's term it's been the same, where you've kind of had bits where it's like, oh, we're really up to performance, but what's happened is we've had one really good performance and let it dip and fell away again, whereas what's happened now is we've had a good win at Twickenham and then managed to then follow it up this weekend, and that's hopefully what you want to see going forward.
Well, Stuart, 2 out of 2 in the first couple of weeks of the Six Nations, never been done before by Scotland, and of course we're talking since the year 2000. So are we turning a corner at last, or is this another false dawn? We've got Ireland to play, we've got France to play, Italy obviously at the end who are improving, as we saw against France at Rome last weekend. But I mean, should we actually be a bit more excited, or are we actually a bit more sort of conservative on the whole thing because we've been there before?
The demands are going to increase in the next 2 internationals for the Scottish players. There's no doubt about it. And I think you could take this form back to the New Zealand game and then the Argentina game. The very good hour against New Zealand, the very good performance against Argentina. Coming into the Six Nations, Scotland were being asked separate, very specific questions in the opening few matches. Can they go down to Twickenham in front of a full house and win? No asterisks beside the victory because it's in an empty stadium. Now, they proved they can. Today was about, can you beat a Warren Gatland managed Welsh side? 11 previous attempts had ended in failure again when Gatland was in charge. Not so much when he was in charge way back with Ireland, but with Wales he always had the Indian sign, it seemed, over Scotland in terms of finding a way to manufacture a victory, even when Scotland maybe had the upper hand in games. Now, again, today, at half-time, that was in the minds of a lot of people. Again, as I said, previous answer, are we going to watch the same movie unfold, in a similar setting with slightly different characters? And Scotland found a way through the use of the bench, through the development within the game of Finn Russell, because he undoubtedly improved as the game went on. And I think an important factor to touch on as well that Grahame mentioned there was Russell sort of narrowing the options of the opposition. But it's narrowed further when you've got Tuipulotu inside. So you've got Russell and Tuipulotu, who deft handlers of the ball. Tuipulotu brings so much to the 12 jersey, and that then suddenly allows Scotland, when they attack, to attack at pace down the width. And you bring in Blair Kinghorn, who had an excellent game coming off the bench, and he really seems to be up for the occasion. So players are coming into the game, they're coming in, they're performing well. George Turner had an excellent game despite the yellow card. Yellow cards and red cards have crucified Scotland in this fixture in the past. Scott Murray's been red carded, Stuart Hogg's been red carded, Xander Fakerson's been red carded, Finn Russell 2 years ago was yellow carded. Those were so costly. Today, another card just before half time, straddling the interval. 7 points was all that Wales could muster in that time, and in fact 7 points is all that Wales could muster all in all. And this will please you, Stuart, because working out, as I've been talking to you here, 1924, 35-10. I think it was at Inverleith. So I think this is Scotland's record equalling points total accumulated against Wales in Edinburgh. And that will make it the most emphatic victory then over Wales, I think, in the matches played. A 51st win for Scotland against Wales out of all the matches that have been played so far. 3 points for a try back then. There you go. But we're talking the cumulative. Yeah. And you had some great characters, Smith and the like in the side. In fact, that probably included an ex-New Zealand All Black captain who was by then a Scottish internationalist as well. But yeah, that's the nature of things. And the thing is, and it always has been a problem with Scotland, has been consistency. And you're now facing two of the best teams in the world. And the group stages of the World Cup, this ridiculous draw that was made 3 years ago, we've got, I think, 3 of the top 5 sides in the world rankings at the moment in the same pot, in the same pool. But this is going to be a real test. Scotland go to Paris, well capable of frightening France. Ireland come here, again a team that have worked out Scotland in the past, seem to be able to manufacture wins, can get into the heads and the minds of the Scottish players. That's going to be a real test. But the Triple Crown's up for grabs, so they've got, even if things go awry in Paris, they've still a huge prize the week after, or the next again game, because Scotland currently are sitting with one Five Nations Championship and 7 Kolkata Cups, I think, since the Grand Slam of 1990, and that is it. So if Gregor Townsend and these players are going to accumulate something that's a little bit more tangible than these individual successes, now's got to be the time to do it. It takes me back to the Autumn Internationals. We won 2 out of the 4. It could easily have been winning all 4 and then going into the Six Nations with another couple of wins. We have a squad now that is as good as it has been for the past couple of decades, surely. I mean, to leave Hamish Watson out is just incredible and shows the depth that we do have. Yeah, there is depth there, undoubtedly. I think what Scotland now have to really focus on, and I'm going to use a term that fans of football will be familiar with in the Premiership. Jurgen Klopp used the term mentality monsters recently. That has to be absolutely front and central, because you quite rightly mentioned the autumn tests. Now, what happened against New Zealand? 60 minutes wasn't enough. In some ways, Scotland got away with one today because they were undercooked in the first 40 minutes. And Gregor Townsend, not necessarily going to sit in front of a press conference and be as blunt as that, but he will know that this team can offer more. They did in the second half. But it's about putting those performances that are as close to 80 minutes consistently. Now that's difficult at a championship at any time, but when you're playing two of the sides that are ranked in the top 2 or 3 in the world in amongst that championship, and the physical nature of the championship, you've got Stuart Hogg going off, and also the same happening with George North. So Stuart Hogg goes off for an HIE, George North goes off for an HIE. You wonder about the sort of the longer term injury impact. Is somebody going to break down during the course of this week that then drops out the squad? So it will put demands on the wider squad of players. But I think it's now not questioning the skill and ability of the players. It's whether the mentality can remain as they go closer and closer to the centre of the kitchen, because it's going to get hot for them. The better they do, the more they produce, the expectation levels rise higher and higher. Spectators, maybe more so than people in the media, can get giddy quite quickly. So, can they handle the heat in the kitchen?
We shall soon find out that for sure. Back to you, Grahame, now, because France, they've had 2 away matches, one at Italy, one at Ireland. That's a very difficult, particularly to go to Dublin early on. They'll come back to Paris and will obviously feel a lot more comfortable. Are we going to see a backlash from France? Because everyone's been talking them up even higher than Ireland before the Six Nations.
Yeah, well, they've got a great team, they've got some great players. I didn't see all of the match today, but there were times when Ireland had them in a bit of a panic, I've got to say, and they were sort of running around like headless chickens for a few seconds. I mean, they're a great side, and at home, yeah, we know it's always going to be tough. Of course, we have won in France famously in the past, but it will be a major test for Scotland. Gregor's a bit worried. He knows that Finn is likely to be playing for Racing this coming weekend, so it's a sort of double thing that it keeps him sharp, but at the same time you don't want him. Heavens, he's playing against a lot of French players, so we don't want him to get injured, do we? And he is so key, as we've said already. But I think that France will be pretty. We know that, we've known that for ages, and despite them losing today, they will be a tough nut to crack. And well, if we can keep the head and get some sort of result out of our visit to Paris, then we can start being a little bit more, optimistic, shall we say. But I know, yes, the crowds get a little bit enthusiastic. We're much more hard-nosed here in the media, and we're very much more pessimistic usually. But I think that the basis is there, and other sides will certainly be aware of Scotland now in a way that they possibly have not. Well, Scotland, Italy, we just put them not now, and so it'll be interesting to see just what the attitude, the mental attitude, is going to be very, very important on both sides. Yeah,
Scotland have certainly won a lot of respect. There's no question about that. And Euan, I'm just wondering from a Welsh perspective now. I mean, that's 2 pretty poor losses, leaking 30 points in each of them. Where does Wales go from here in the next 3 matches? I mean, there's not much they can really do now apart from try and prepare for the World Cup. What's going to happen?
I think that's a difficult thing, is because it's an awkward kind of time for them to be in, because they've got 3 games coming up before then having to prepare for a World Cup, and as you say, there's not much for them left to play for in the Six Nations. So in a way, they will just have to use the next 3 games as a kind of learning curve, see how different players get on. Obviously, Wales Gatland's brought in some different combinations and different players in different places. So it will just be a case of them just they'll look at. Obviously, it's an age-old saying, the one game at a time, and they will just take a look at this game and work on that for the next game, and they won't be thinking of the World Cup. But in a way, that's the only thing they can really aim for at the moment.
All right, well, let's quickly go round the table then, because it's France next in a couple of weeks' time. Let's assume that Finn Russell does get through his match against Racing next week with no injuries, and we've got a full squad to choose from. How are we going to do, Euan?
I think it'll come down to whether or not Scotland can put in as close to an 80-minute performance as possible, and I think that Scotland will edge it by 3.
3 points, Grahame. We'll take that, wouldn't we?
We'll take that. We're quite happy. So that I can feel so much better when I'm wrong, I think France will win by 5.
5 points, there we are. Well, of course, today, Stuart, we managed to get another try bonus. That's 2 out of 2 try bonuses in the Six Nations.
Yeah, and just before I give my prediction, if anybody gets the chance to watch even the first half of the game in Dublin, Ireland against France, possibly the best 40 minutes in the history of the Six Nations.
Really? As good as that?
Astonishing performance. And I know you guys had other commitments and a timetable to work to just prior to half-time, but just after you left, the most extraordinary phase of play and the most dramatic goal line defence from a French point of view to keep out Ireland. I mean, it was a really, really marvellous display. I'd like to say it would be a drawn game, because that's then you've got a win, a loss, and a draw. I'm a bit like both the guys. I think it'll be a single point game. I have a horrible feeling that there'll be maybe some matters out of our control, or Scotland's control, that might end up winning the game for the French, and it could be down to, again, discipline and interpretation of the rules. We watched, a Southern Hemisphere referee the game at Twickenham last weekend, and there was hardly any TMO interventions. It flowed. There was hardly any interruptions at all. The first half here at Murrayfield was quite stop-start. It was quite pedantic at times, the referee and the interpretation. So the referee's going to have a huge part, because the more the game flows, the happier the Scots will be. But there is the possibility that they could shoot themselves in the foot or be shot in the foot.
So you're suggesting they might go back to being the old Scotland?
Not necessarily that, but I think they would do enough to really frighten France and really come away disappointed, come away with points, and that will certainly set them up against an Ireland team that are really purring at the moment. The Irish side are really purring just now. So it's going to be two fascinating games, and it's going to give us a much better indicator of where the Scotland team really are and what they need to do in order to progress in September in the World Cup from a quite hideous group, really.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, guys, for your time today. That's Stuart McFarlane, Grahame MacGregor and Euan Welsh. That's our edition of View from the Commentary Box for today. We'll be back in a few weeks' time, after the French game, in fact, when Ireland come here, and Scotland will be going officially for the Triple Crown. We haven't said that for a long time. Thanks much indeed for joining us. Bye for now.